Okay, so it says here, avoid legal snags by telling people they're being recorded. So you're being recorded, Rupert.
Right.
So
Otherwise, there would have been a lawsuit coming your way.
Or a law dress, as the case may be.
Oh, very good. Very good. Very inclusive.
So yeah, you suggested this. This is the Kino Kingdom 4 now, and I've just finished editing the second, so I am catching up. But you said you've got like 9 films.
I think it's only 8. Come on.
Oh no, you said 8 plus the one we saw together.
Oh yes, yes. So it is 9, in fact. Yeah, it's good. I almost forgot about Virtual Combat.
Yeah, 1995's finest hour, and that includes Automatic with Oliver Gruner. So, I'll go first then, seeing as because I'm recording, I'm technically the host. So the ones I've got are 21 Bridges. Did we discuss 21 Bridges last time?
Briefly, because I watched it and I recommended it.
Yes. Right. Okay. So 21 Bridges, Killer Elite, Mission Impossible: Rogue Nation, Mission Impossible: Fallout, Mary, and Virtual Combat.
Good. Well, I've seen all of them except Mary, so that's good. I watched the Mission Impossible ones very recently, so that's good.
Yeah, it's a weird one because I'll get into it later on, but it was ever since we watched Dumb and Dumber Captured on this podcast a few months ago, it's kind of opened up our reasoning of like, oh, let's watch a film, or let's just watch an action film, and instead of thinking, oh, I want to watch a horror, like just going with the flow, and it's actually been quite nice just watching different genres.
Yeah. Like, I like the idea of you like branching out to different genres straight into action movies.
Yeah, like really massive budget action movies. This is weird because in Mission Impossible, no one goes down a ladder and ends up on a roof. It's bizarre. The editing is fantastic.
Actually makes geographical sense. It's so strange. Right, so the films I've got are The Witches, Erin Brockovich, Just Mercy, The Rock, 48 Hours, Jurassic World: Fallen Kingdom, Dante's Peak, and Pocahontas.
Yeah.
It's quite a range.
It's interesting because you've named a few films there that a couple that I really like and a couple that I liked as a teenager and now question.
I think I know which one you might be referring to there.
so yeah, it's Kevin Smith syndrome is what it is, isn't it? When you're like, this is cool, this is so cool, and then you watch it 30 years later, and then you go, is it? Is it though?
Mallrats was a classic example of that because I think maybe I was a little bit too young to get into Clerks at the time. So my first Kevin Smith was really Mallrats, and they're so funny at the time.
Yeah, they're just like us. They're like me and my mates.
Yeah, no, but the bits I remember laughing at, I feel a bit embarrassed to laugh, even embarrassed to even remember laughing at.
I'm too embarrassed to remember laughing, I'm afraid.
It's a very specific syndrome.
Yeah, and then he tells a joke, and then you just go really red-faced and like well up. And he's like, no, it's okay. You can laugh. You don't have to remember laughing at the same joke previously. You can just laugh, and that's a different thing.
Oh my god. Yeah. So, if you want to kick off, big time.
Okay. Well, we'll start off then, because let me just have a little look. Well, I'll tell you, I'll start off with the Mission Impossible films, and I'll just do them together because, I just fancied Tom Cruise. No, I was listening to a Mark Kermode and Jack Howard podcast. I'm not sure how much of Jack Howard I can listen to because he has a few mannerisms that I find irritating.
Who is Jack Howard?
He's a 28-year-old film critic. And it's I think his approach and like his laugh and stuff leans a little bit too into YouTubers for me. There's something a bit YouTubey about his presentation, and I just find it a bit grating. So. Yeah, I watched. I can't remember the reason. Yeah, he said that Mission Impossible: Rogue Nation was like his favorite, and it was better than Fallout. And then I realized the last one I saw was the one before that, which was called
Ghost Protocol.
Ghost Protocol, and I didn't like it because Jeremy Renner was in it, and I thought they were going to try and replace Tom Cruise with Jeremy Renner, which is something I thought.
I think that was the original plan, but they really, really dialed that back in the following two, didn't they?
He just got an irritating. Like it seems a harsh thing to say. But I just don't like looking at him. Like he's not like he's an ugly man. I just find his presence a bit grating.
He can be good but only when he's a supporting actor.
In Wind River.
Wind River, yes, and also in The Town. He's really good in that.
Yeah, I like both of those films, but in my head, that's not Jeremy Renner. I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is.
I think it's Hollywood's insistence on trying to make him a leading man. Same as Sam Worthington. You know, they get these guys and they're good looking, so they kind of just. But Jeremy Renner, he isn't even good looking. He's got a weird rubbery face, isn't he? You are quaffing. You are quaffing.
Ooh.
Oh, if you're in New York, you'd be coughing, but you're quaffing.
If I had strayed within 2 meters of another man, I would be coughing. I mean, we went out for a walk. It was so hot that when I came back and I went straight into this, I realized I'm so thirsty. But I was too lazy to mute my third album. So yeah, it was. So I watched the right way around. We watched Rogue Nation and then Fallout, and I watched Rogue Nation, and I really got to say, there's just something about Tom Cruise. He's almost like a failsafe for me. Like if he's in a film, we've had this conversation before, but he's not. He's such a solid screen presence that you know the film is going to be of a certain quality. And I was watching Rogue Nation, and I really kind of got swept up in it because, of course, I've got like a massive TV now, and I've got like a really nice soundbar, and that suits that genre perfectly.
You haven't mentioned Sean Harris yet, but I'm sure you will.
You bloody right I will, because who's secretly becoming one of my favorite people, because he whispers everything.
I know.
You got any lozenges?
He's so menacing in everything he does.
Possums.
Like he could be quite wasted in that film, if you see what I mean. He could just be like a slightly creepy looking dude, but he's genuinely quite menacing.
Yes, because you get the impression throughout the film that you're not really sure what he's capable of.
Yeah.
Or his abilities and stuff. And he needs to wash his hair. In not so much in that film, in the second one. Oh, he needs to wash his hair. So yeah, I watched it and I just really liked it. And I just thought I love the set pieces, and I mean, Luther Stickell and even Simon Pegg, and I quite like Simon Pegg's character because he's not your typical like IT geek, although he's kind of like doesn't really want to get, he doesn't look the part. He does get involved, and he's not just a two-dimensional like, oh, I'm the IT nerd. Yes. Like every time fires a gun, I run away and cry sort of thing. And I like Vin Rames as an actor. I've always liked, especially in what was that film he was in? Striptease with Demi Moore.
Oh my God.
So I like Ving Rhames a lot, and I watched the film and I thought, I think I've been with this series on and off since 1997, six,
yeah.
And I liked it so much. I thought I'm going to watch Fallout. Then I might just start from the beginning again because the first Mission Impossible is so so different to the rest of them. It's so much more like it's such a almost like a little genre piece. Like it's almost like a staged kind of thing, and I really like that. Plus, it'll have some amazing use of early internet in it, which I always enjoy in films.
Oh yeah. I watched it quite recently. It's like because I've never actually seen it, but it's Brian De Palma, of course. So it's got these really virtuoso kind of like shots in it and stuff, and like these cool set pieces. But it's got a very different kind of tone to it, almost. And
it's much more like, but like smoky, filmed at night. Like very much a shady company working behind the scenes sort of thing, as opposed to the all out. They're just the good guys, and this is just a lot of action set pieces.
Yeah, it's very much more old fashioned, really. It was like a TV series, I guess. So,
like the second one could almost just be a reboot because it's so different tonally. So I watched Rogue Nation, really really enjoyed it, and then I watched Fallout, and I will say that I think Mission Impossible Fallout is one of the best action films I've ever seen because it's about 2 hours and 20 minutes, I think, and I was watching it with Faye, and I paused it. I think to get it, knowing me, probably to get a drink. And I paused it, and I was almost like, I don't use the term often, but like, do you know when you're kind of like a little bit breathless and worn out by like the intensity of everything that's happening? Yeah. Everything's so full on and so just demands your attention and stuff. And I paused it, and I thought it was like 2 hours in, but it was only like 50 minutes. But I thought, oh, that's amazing because I'm enjoying this so much.
Yeah,
it's like they're packing in what could be like almost 2 or 3 films into one monster, and there's nothing flabby about it. It's all just like boom, boom, boom.
Yes, it's very intense. Yeah,
and
non-stop.
Sean Harris is used more as well.
Yeah, I didn't know it was like 2 hours and 20 minutes. It doesn't feel that way.
No, not at all.
It's paced well, so Yeah, because it doesn't really matter how long a film is if it's engaging all the way through.
And if every scene adds value to it.
Yes.
It's so. But yeah, obviously you got Alec Baldwin in there as well, and I kind of liked what they did with his character. Like, again, no one is kind of just really two-dimensional. It's not just like good and bad, and there's some like decent conversations in there. Some like, and I love that there's a lot of in those two films especially, and I can't remember the other films well enough, but a lot of sequences where Ethan Hunt is in a situation and you think you are completely fingered and you cannot get out of this, and then they do, and it's like, oh, that was cool, I like that. It never felt cheap, and I never felt cheated as a viewer.
Yeah, so there were no Deus Ex Machina moments where it's like, okay, well, that's just ridiculous. You know, the whole thing about crawling around the dark finding a shotgun or whatever it is, you know, that kind of stuff. Like, I'm thinking, like, when he gets rescued, it's like, right, okay, so someone's just, it's all to do with like someone just thinking ahead or thinking outside the box sort of thing. So yeah, you never feel cheated.
What was that reference then, crawling in the dark finding a shotgun?
I don't know whether you told me about this. It was
a book I read.
It was a book you read. That was it. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a book, and it was it was called The Furies. I think it was called The Furies by someone. And I read it years ago, and it was baffling because it was really well received as this really like post-apocalyptic, like adrenaline-fueled book. But then when I was reading it, I remember the word somehow was used so much. There was a bit where like he's trapped underground in like a collapsing mine, and he just describes like how hopeless it is, and then it just says somehow we found a way out. And you're like, what? hang on. And then there's a bit where he's in a house and he's getting attacked with these like alien things. And he's like, somehow we found a shotgun. And you're, what? So
I think that's what I was thinking of. Yeah.
Oh, that's right. I thought it was a film. I thought, please don't tell me they made a film of it. But yeah, somehow we found a shotgun. That should be a moment we refer to.
It's like it's Deus Ex Machina like writing, isn't it? Really, it's like I don't like the author can't work out how they get out of this situation, so therefore they just conjure a shotgun.
Conjuring the shotgun. That was Ted Nugent's favorite film.
Yeah, I think the thing about Rogue Nation and Fallout as well is the fact that Jeremy Renner isn't in it so much. That helps. Yeah, because I know what you mean about Ghost Protocol. It's got some really cool sequences in it, but it is very obviously seems to be preparing the takeover, if you see what I mean. And that was a bit dispiriting, really, because he has not got the charisma of Tom Cruise.
And you don't need the whole point of like everything in the Mission Impossible itself is like it's like Ethan Hunt is the driving force, and he's got a team. So having someone on an equal level with him just kind of dilutes everything a little bit. You want the focus to be on one man doing these things, and yeah, absolutely. And I think with Jeremy Renner like dipping out of it a little bit, and I'm just gonna say this, and I don't care who disagrees with me, and I'm just gonna say that Rebecca Ferguson is pretty.
Whoa, hang on.
I'm gonna have to edit that out. I know it's completely.
Let's not throw around these controversial comments.
Yeah, there was like in that I know like he's got his wife Julia, and obviously she comes back into it a little bit, but there were sequences in that, and I like how it never just devolves into like a love story, but there were moments in it and where you think, I can genuinely see the chemistry. I can genuinely see why you would fall for this woman. It makes perfect sense in the story, and like because she is a complete screamer, and again, not a two-dimensional character.
Yeah.
So yeah, big fan of those two films, and it's made me want to watch them. I'm going to work backwards.
Yeah, I would say that the early ones aren't quite as good. Well, the first one's quite good, but the John Woo one is a bit of a mess, especially when he just beats up what's his name on the beach at the end.
Is it like? Hang on, no, don't say. Doug Ray Scott.
Yes, and it's just like he's a slightly older man and a weedier man. And he just like has a fight on the beach in slow motion. It's awful. The third one is the J.J. Abrams one, and that's okay. That's the one where the bomb goes off in the woman's brain.
Oh my god! And the eyes go, amazing scene.
Yeah, that's got a really good final sequence bit, really exciting ending. But yeah, I just think, basically the first one's quite good, but very different. And then really it's the modern ones, the Ghost Protocol, Rogue Nation, Fallout. There, I think that's where it's almost rebooted, really, isn't it?
Yes. So, that was my take on it. Like I know it's a bit. I like in these podcasts talking about like sort of more niche retro action films and horrors and stuff. But if it's going to be a huge blockbuster, it's got to be a great one. And I think that they are like a high watermark of the genre sort of thing.
Yep. And when people die, they actually die.
Which is good.
Which is good. Unusual in a blockbuster these days. So
that's a fair point, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. Right then. So, well, the first on my list is The Witches, which is a bit of a. I don't know if you've seen this film from 1990.
Is this the 90s film?
It's from 1990.
Who's in it? Sorry, I think when you say The Witches, I always think of The Witches of Eastwick.
Angelica Houston is in it, and Rowan Atkinson. It's a lot of British actors.
The fact that you're struggling to remember who's in it isn't a good sign.
It's a load of British actors you'd recognise, people who now cropping up in like Downton Abbey and stuff, basically. But anyway, it's directed by Nicholas Roeg, and he was the guy. He was the guy who did Performance with Mick Jagger and Don't Look Now, of course.
Yes.
And whoever thought it was a good idea to get him to direct a children's horror film, is bizarre. See, because I remember this film being quite a big deal at the time, but I think it flopped pretty hard at the box office. I'm not really surprised.
It's not based on a Roald Dahl thing.
Yeah, it is. It's based on.
Right. Okay, that doesn't.
And it's a pretty flimsy story, really, because it's really dark. I mean, this kid's parents basically just die at the start, and he's raised by his grandmother, and they live in Germany, and she believes in witches anyway. And they go to England, and they stay in this hotel, and it happens to have like a conference of witches there.
This is really bringing back memories for me.
Yeah. It's amazingly scary for children and too kind of like shallow and silly for adults, really. Jim Henson does the like puppetry, so that's really cool. Good. But Roeg is like, he's such a strange choice for like a children's director, because he uses loads of like naturalistic lighting and like handheld camera and these weird crooked close-ups, and it makes everything really uneasy. But also the fact that the script isn't that good and the performances are pretty bad most of the time.
Bad in what way? Like over the top?
Well, just like a lot of it seems to be post-dubbed in a weird way. I've noticed. I mean, if you watch Don't Look Now, I mean, the sound quality in that's quite poor. There's a lot of post-dubbing in that, so I don't know whether it's something that Nicholas Roeg was doing. But anyway, Angelica Houston's really good, and she kind of like really chews the scenery. But then she hasn't got nearly as much to do as she did in the Addams Family films, so there's not really enough of a reason to watch it. But basically, the film is centered on two like really insane sequences, which is one is where the witches tear their faces off to reveal the witches, and the other is where all the witches are turned into mice, basically. So, and it's basically when all the Jim Henson stuff comes into it. Other than that, it's pretty.
I've got a feeling that I watched this film, and it was like when we had like in school. So when this was released in 1992, so I would have been in school, and I think it was one of the ones they chucked on, as like a treat for everyone. And I don't think they realized how dark it was. And I remember watching it as a kid, and I remember being so frightened, but like trying not to show I was frightened, but feeling really uncomfortable.
Yeah, it is.
And I think that's why I remember certain series, because I think it's imprinted. The terror is imprinted in my mind.
It is genuinely quite frightening. Yeah, there's quite a cool scene where the kid who's been turned into a mouse like scuttles around a kitchen, and he's like dodging feet and falling into like vats of boiling soup and stuff. So, and that made me think that probably inspired Ratatouille a little bit. But yeah, overall, there is a remake coming out as well this year, apparently.
Nicholas Roeg again, or
no? This is directed by Robert Zemeckis, so slightly safe pair of hands, and co-written by Guillermo del Toro, obviously.
Oh, nice.
So I think, although it won't be as weird as this one, I think it will just be better, really.
Yeah.
And apparently Roald Dahl hated the way they changed the ending in the film, because at the end it's just a really happy ending sort of thing. Like, but it would have been pretty fucking dark.
It's over 20 years old, Rupert, so please divulge.
Okay, so basically he's turned into a mouse. I mean, they've got rid of all the witches, but he's a mouse still, and he's living with his grandmother, and he's saying to her, look, I don't mind being a mouse. It's quite fun, really. I don't know how long I'm going to live, and it's quite dark and all that kind of stuff. And his grandmother's like really worried. And then one of the witches who survived, and his good witch, comes along and turns him back into a boy. And that was the thing that Roald Dahl absolutely hated, because it was. But then I think it needed it after the sheer darkness and like horror of what had gone on before. Just to leave him as a mouse would have been really, really awful. Yeah. So it's worth watching as a curiosity, but I don't think it's a very good film.
It's not anyone's favorite film, sort of thing.
No. It's probably given a lot of people nightmares. Yeah. So that was The Witches.
Okay. Well, I did 2 in my one. So do you want to do another one? I've just remembered another one that I've checked on my list as well.
Okay. Well, I'll jump onto Erin Brockovich then, because I've been meaning to watch this for ages, but it's one of those films where it's like, do I want to watch this?
I think I watched this. I say watched it when I worked in a video store, the golden days.
Right. Okay.
I think it's very much not my thing, but I think I put it on as I was serving customers, so I have watched half of it. So I know the setup, but
yeah. So it's like a true story set in like early 90s, and Erin Brockovich is like a single mum involved in a traffic accident. She uses a local lawyer, ends up working for them, and then she uncovers this massive conspiracy at a local power company which has been poisoning the water, causing cancer in the residents and stuff. So, and apparently it's extremely accurate to the real events, which is always a bonus. But so basically, she's able to kind of mobilize the community to take class action. And what's quite nice about it is the reason she's able to mobilize the community is because she's not a lawyer. So basically, she can walk in and say, "I'm not a lawyer," and then she's very relatable. She's very kind of angry and funny. And she's quite annoying, but she's also principled. And it is a really good performance by Julia Roberts, and she did win an Oscar for it.
Oh, okay.
And I like the fact that it's not the most like obvious box office hit, because it is a feminist film about poor people, which isn't really a recipe for cash. But yeah, it's it was very very good, and it's carried by her really.
There must be someone who kind of represents the evil of the power company, and I'm assuming it's an older white man.
Yeah, who is it? I don't think there's anyone specific. Yeah,
you're not going to like reveal that it's like Martin Short or Clunes or Sheen, as I was originally going to say.
Well, no, I don't think there isn't really a figurehead for the evil side of it. I mean, Albert Finney
quite
is
nice in
her
itself.
boss. Yeah. Well, but that kind of, in a way, speaks to the slight kind of shallowness of it, because it's very much like a David and Goliath thing, but it doesn't really. I mean, it's just this power company is like this kind of unseen entity almost, like it's just this big thing, and so it never goes into detail about what they were up to, or it doesn't try and humanize anyone from that side. But I don't know whether it really needs to, because it's much more about Erin Brockovich, and it's quite cool the way that Aaron Eckhart's in it is her like biker boyfriend guy, and what's quite nice is that his character is basically the character that women have been playing for decades, where he's essentially the suffering housewife at home sort of thing, looking after the kids and saying, I can't do this anymore and all this kind of stuff. So that was quite cool. But yeah, I'm not sure that it's got a lot of depth to it, but it's very much a crowd pleaser. It's like a feel good movie, I suppose. And I think Steven Soderbergh's made more challenging kind of hot topic films like Traffic and Side Effects, and of course topical Contagion as well. Yes. A bit more hard hitting.
Well, Erin Brockovich.
Yeah, it's worth the watch because it's just really well made.
Yeah, I don't know if it's one of. It seems a bit too lighthearted for me to ever think I'll watch it. There's so many other things I'd probably check on. But no, that's good to know that that's a little bit different. What made you watch that film? You on a Steven Soderbergh bent, or was it just?
I think it's been on my watch list for so long now. But I might as well mention the other film I saw, which was also a courtroom kind of thing, because it kind of relates to it, and it's much harsher and deeper, which was Just Mercy, which is free on the Microsoft Store. currently to rent because, like, in support of Black Lives Matter, because it's about a miscarriage of justice which occurred in the 1980s in Alabama, and so it's a true to life thing, and it's basically about a guy played by Jamie Foxx who is he's arrested for a crime he very much didn't commit, and then Michael B. Jordan plays this young lawyer, young ambitious kind of aspirational lawyer who comes along and who believes he can kind of get him off because it's so obviously a miscarriage of justice. But of course, he is facing like a system which is so inherently racist that he just doesn't have a chance. It's got Tim Blake Nelson in it, who's really good as well. Really creepy. But yeah, it's very quietly directed. It's like not very showy or anything.
Who actually directed it? Sorry,
it's but someone called Destin Daniel Cretton, and he also wrote the script. And the script is a bit of a blunt instrument. It's one of those ones where it's all about getting the information across. It's not very like poetic or anything, but it does it very efficiently, and it's very successful at kind of portraying the sheer frustration of coming up against an inherently kind of unbendable system. What's really cool about it is the way that racism is presented, because I don't think the N-word is ever said by anyone in it. So all of the racism is just bubbling under the surface. If you see what I mean, it's like in people's actions, like the fact that when the lawyer first goes to the prison to speak to his client, it's like he's told he's got to have a strip search, and it's like, I don't think I do actually, but he's too young to understand, like he really doesn't. And so he goes through this strip search, and it's obvious that it's got nothing to do with security, and it's just a power thing by the white guard. It's just awful, and it's all about the looks and little comments that people make, and it really puts you into that kind of that uneasy feeling that people are looking at you differently, sort of thing. So it's quite clever that way. So that's really good, and it's definitely not, unlike Erin Brockovich, it's definitely not a feel-good movie, more of like a feel-ashamed movie. But so not really one for a kid's birthday party, perhaps, but very, very good. It feels like kind of necessary viewing somehow. I think you get on better with that one, to be honest.
And it's free on the Microsoft
It was, I don't know whether it's still free, but it was free, maybe for all of June on the Microsoft Store, which is really awkward to actually navigate to get to it, but if you can get hold of it, definitely worth the watch.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah,
I'll shift tone a bit then, lighten things up a little bit, and I'll talk about Guest House Paradiso, which I watched. Again, it's a film I've seen a few times. I'm a huge Rik Mayall fan, and obviously miss him a lot. So, and of course, the thing is that is like, really, when it comes to films, there's not much of a body of work unless you're watching like The Young Ones or Bottom, So I was gravitated against this Paradiso, even though my memories of it are like kind of mixed. And I remember at the time watching. So for those who don't know, it's basically the film of Bottom, effectively. And you've got obviously Adrian Emerson, Rik Mayall, obviously Vincent Cassel playing a really surprisingly foul character in it.
It's just a bizarre bit of casting. Okay.
Yeah, it's But
when was it made?
1999.
Okay, so it's after Drop Dead Fred then.
Yes, it is. Just a touch. There's no Phoebe Cates in sight, unfortunately. So I was, the first thing to say is I was on Netflix and I put it on and thought, oh, it's obviously buffering. But no, it's got this weird, almost sub-DVD quality to it that you'll know more about this than me. It's almost like you can see the interlacing.
Yeah, it's probably a VHS rip.
Right. It's awful quality. I don't know if it would be nice to. I would have enjoyed it much more if it was in like a higher quality, but it was the only version I could see, so I chucked it on. And the key things to take away is there are some really, because obviously I've got such a history with the characters and the actors in it. Simon Pegg is in it. I always forget he's in it, but it's very blunt. and it's like a very physical comedy. But there is some really funny moments, and there are some fun moments that are okay. But then the last 20 minutes of the film, it's just like a kind of a gross out fest, and it's just
Oh.
it's not funny. Um,
Ah.
so I just think that it just goes to show that like when people make TV series very rarely, especially comedies, it's hard to stretch out something over like
Hello.
the works in kind of it's punchy and it's all about the performances and the delivery. If when you're watching like a TV show where the camera's basically just on them and you're laughing at them doing stuff, when you've got this like spectacle and there's a lot more to worry about, because the funniest episodes of Bottom are when it's just them in the flat talking to each other.
Yes.
Like that's the
Yeah.
genius comes from the chemistry.
There was one episode of Bottom, I can't remember which one it was, but it is literally that the whole way through, and it's the one where Richie is just really bored, and he's just like Eddie's trying to watch TV, and he's just playing games with himself over the other side of the room, like picking up the phone and like
that's the
picking up
first
the phone
ever
and saying
episode.
hello. It's
That's
amazing.
the first ever episode of it.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah.
It's so funny.
It's really weird actually, because when you watch the later episodes, the flat is like changed around a little bit, and they don't use the shots they did. They so it's almost like a pilot, an aired pilot. But yeah, when you've got that in a film, and it's not just about them talking and their interaction with each other, and you've got all these like set pieces, and there's much more of a focus on like this comedic violence. The funniest parts to me are still when they just react into each other. Like there's a bit where one of the funniest bits in the film is when they're like packing because they realize they've poisoned everyone. They need to get out of the guest house, and like Eddie just opens the door, and and Richie he's done something. He's basically dropped something to his trousers. He's trying to like shake it out, and obviously it's like this like high octane scene where they're just trying to get out as fast as possible before the police turn up. And he just says, "This is no time for dancing." And it's just the delivery. It's like such a basic joke, but the delivery and the fact you're watching a man dance and someone else saying, "This isn't the time for this," that's the most amazing thing. But then when you've got people spewing and more visual jokes and that go on, you think, no, I actually much like this. Prefer this on a smaller scale. It's good to watch because it is. I think it's the only thing that Adrian Edmondson has ever directed, and it's always good to see Rik Mayall in whatever form he's in. But it's not. I can imagine if I showed that to say. If I had a kid and I showed them, they'd be like, "It's okay. I don't know. It's bad quality." Yeah, it's a VHS rip, son.
Can you name the game that Rik Mayall did a voice for?
Hogs of War.
I knew you get it straight away. Instantly, Hogs of War.
Of course.
Play obscure PlayStation 1 turn-based game. Love it.
I bought that off eBay on the day that he died. He died, and I was obviously watching. Someone put up a thing about Hogs of War, and I bought it fast. I thought I'd love to have that. I used to have it, and I bought it again. It's okay, but it's just his delivery. It's just an amazing man. Much mystery.
Yeah.
So it's more like an artifact. It's a nice artifact to have, but it's not a particularly good film.
So it hasn't held up too well.
No, I didn't even. This is the thing. Even as a teenager, I remember watching it and thinking this isn't as funny as the show, and then watching it now, when I've basically spent like a further 15 or 20 years watching those episodes. Like I probably watch all of the episodes of Bottom, I'd say, through at least once every 2 years, and I'm so familiar with it, and like you know it word for word. And like you see, the genius of it is you can watch one episode looking at one of them, and then watch the same episode looking at the other one, and it's just as funny, just because of how they are, just because of how their reactions to things. So yes, not a particularly good film, but one for the fans maybe. Yeah,
it's it was a very special partnership, those two. It was very good. But I wonder if that kind of comedy, generally that anarchic kind of comedy, then became gross out comedy. Perhaps it evolved
like
into
it focused on the wrong thing.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, because anarchic comedy always had a gross element to it, I guess. But because you think about the young ones and stuff like that, it was pretty. And Bottom was pretty disgusting. There were gross out elements in it, but there was a bit of satire in it as well, wasn't there?
Yeah, like you were laughing at them.
And it was definitely satirizing kind of, and it came out of like the Thatcher era, I suppose, of like because Thatcher was convinced that we lived in a classless society, and it was showing that actually there clearly is an underclass of people here. Yeah. So yes.
Have you ever seen it, by the way?
No, I've never seen it.
There's no real reason to watch it.
No.
If you're ever in the mood for it, just watch Bottom. You'll just watch it and think it's a slightly disappointing film, really.
Yeah, I'm not. I mean, I know it's not like a Hollywood movie or anything, but anything where good TV shows, good small scale TV shows, when they go on the big screen, there's something about, I don't know, the way that cinema is shot and stuff. I just don't find it as funny as like the basic single camera setup type style of the like the sitcom. See what I mean?
It's a bizarre thing in every, because like with just using a quick example off the top of my head, like with YouTubers, with the Angry Video Game Nerd, and there's a couple of people I used to like but we don't watch anymore, called the Game Chasers, and they make like, you know, decent-ish kind of, you know, 15-20 minute shows, and then they say, oh, we're going to get money together for film, and you're like, what? It doesn't translate.
Yeah, it's not necessary, is it? Right. Let's move on to The Rock then.
Finally.
This is not as good as I found it when I was 15, I gotta say. I mean, I know that's going to come as a bit of a surprise. But I was really entranced this time by The Rock. I was really entranced by the pace of the editing in the film. I mean, I'm not talking just in terms of the action scenes, but in between as well. Like, because once I noticed how little time Michael Bay chose to stay on a single shot, I actually felt a little bit queasy, because it was almost a little bit too fast all the time. Of course, he can't keep the camera still either, because
I just remember there's just constant swooping shots.
Oh, it's ridiculous, and like for no reason. You don't need a swooping shot when two people are talking. It just detracts from what's going on in the frame. But anyway, yeah, the lighting and the production design is just absolutely horrible as well. It's sort of somewhere between like Tony Scott and Joel Schumacher at his most camp sort of thing. There's a scene where Nick Cage, you remember this, I'm sure.
I remember this one very well, actually.
Yes. There's a scene where Nick Cage is spewing in the bathroom.
Yes. William Forsythe walks in.
Yeah. But so he's spewing, and there's this weird, like, in the window behind him, there's this weird kind of gyrating orange light. And it's like the building's on fire, and I couldn't take my eyes off it. I was thinking, why would that be there? Why would there
in a bathroom?
Yeah, like, why would there be this huge, like it looks like there's fire outside. It's so bizarre. And like, I mean, Tony Scott was obviously a bit of a stylist when it came to lighting and stuff, but essentially, I mean, yeah, it wasn't very natural lighting, but you could at least pinpoint a source, if you see what I mean. Like, it just was weird. Anyway, the action scenes, yeah, totally unintelligible, partly because of the editing, but also because Bay, he just tries to find the most awkward angle to shoot from for some reason. And another thing I noticed this time is it's like weirdly coy when it comes to like violence, but it's fine with like really like foul language. It's fine with the swearing, but like the violence is weirdly muted.
Weirdly bloodless, isn't it?
Yeah, I think if it was made today, it would probably be the other way around. I think they'd be a bit coy about the language, but the violence would be, well, at least the same. Also, I want to point out, I'm not sure that Ed Harris's plan makes any sense in this film, right? Because he obviously he steals these
VX
chemical weapons to threaten San Francisco, and unless there's remuneration for these veterans or whatever. But anyway, so he's a proven patriot, this guy, and he is well known to the security staff, because they're calling him by like first names and stuff. He is evidently reluctant to show force. So like, even when Michael Biehn confronts him, he tries to stop the violence. So with all that in mind, why would he, of all people, chuck a load of chemical weapons at a civilian population? Like, it doesn't make any sense. I mean, they don't even really try verbal negotiation. They come up with the most ridiculous plan to take this known felon, of course played by Sean Connery, on this ridiculous mission into the place. And of course, the first thing that Sean Connery does is try to kill one of the FBI guys, then go on the run and cause absolute chaos through San Francisco. That's the point at which they probably should have thought, I don't know, maybe it was a pretty bad idea. Maybe we should try and talk to this guy. I mean, yeah, yeah, and it's but yeah, it doesn't. It just the whole incursion idea is just rendered even more silly by that point. So you're waiting for the moment it becomes like a buddy movie with Cage and Connery. That's really what you're waiting for, and it takes about over an hour to get there.
Oh yeah. But yeah, I watched it relatively recently as well, and I was just the dialogue. All the lines that are supposed to be cool. You can almost, they may as well, after they say each line, look at the camera, do like a little smirk with their tongue in their cheek. But it's so like clunkily written, like the way that like they try to out cool each other, and you think, oh, just shut up, guys, you're in your 50s. Yeah. So I'm not sold by. As a kid, I probably watched that film about 40 or 50 times with a Plowman. But now, I just think I'm not watching that again, because I know it's Mallrats. It would be like watching Mallrats. The stuff that appealed to me at the time just wouldn't appeal to me anymore.
Yeah, it really has not aged well. But well, maybe it's not a case of it aging well. Maybe it just wasn't that good in the first place.
I mean, we watched it as teenagers. What do we know?
Yeah, I remember thinking like that chase sequence where they chase them through San Francisco was the coolest, like most exciting action scene when I was a kid. But my God, it's unintelligible now. You cannot. It's just a load of like unrelated
turning corners.
Yeah,
yeah.
It's weird. Yeah. Yeah. So that was The Rock.
That was that then.
That was that. Probably won't be watching that for another 20 years.
When you watch it, it's come round again, and yep, it's absolutely brilliant this time. I'll be 2 minutes, sorry. I'm going to quickly get a top up.
Okie doke.
Sorry, so is it me? Sorry. Okay, yeah. So it's. I'm just having a look at the ones I got left now. So another one I watched was 21 Bridges, which you saw and you suggested. Because I think actually the reason I forgot I watched it was because after you suggested it, I watched it literally like went at the living room and then just turned it on and chucked it on, and it was really good, Rupert. It feels like a really good. It was like a really good kind of thriller, like action thriller.
Yeah. That
was like really snappy, but also there was like a little bit of weight to it, which was really nice.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of kind of like relatively unspoken things underneath the action that gave it a little bit of depth that I really enjoyed.
Yeah.
And some the way that they work out the plot, like there was a point in it where they talk about how they know that the police weren't at that like restaurant or wherever it was because of the way they knocked on the door, because they didn't use like the ball of their fist, they tapped like they were just coming in to do something. Really subtle things.
Yeah.
And like things in the dialogue that I thought, this is a nice, clever written film, but doesn't get too bogged down in its own sort of pretensions. It rolls it up in a real action film.
For all its silliness, it has what is it that I heard a phrase today? I think that
up and at 'em?
It was something that someone said. There's a series on YouTube where James Cameron like interviews like really famous directors, and someone used an Akira Kurosawa quote where he refers
what? How come I didn't know James Cameron interviewing other directors?
Yeah, like they're very brief, but it's like Guillermo del Toro, Steven Spielberg. Can't remember who else.
Oh, that sounds crap. I'm glad I didn't know about that.
They're really brief, but they are interesting. And one of them refers to this phrase from Akira Kurosawa called "immaculate reality." I think that's what he calls it.
That's another Dream Theater album.
But it's in reference to. I think it's in reference to. It doesn't matter if the film itself is true to life, but it has to be true to itself. So it has to be watertight in terms of its own logic and its own rules. If you see what I mean.
Yes.
And so it doesn't, because that's what's frustrating when you're watching a film. Not when it's like, you don't think to yourself, oh, that wouldn't happen in real life. You're thinking, well, that character wouldn't do that, or that wouldn't happen in the world that's being presented here, sort of thing. It's breaking its own rules. And I think what 21 Bridges does really well is like, it's ridiculous, but in the context of itself, it makes sense, and everything makes sense in it. Like the fact that they are getting him, that specific person, to be the detective on this case because of the fact that he's got a reputation for just shooting people down. So it's like, all right, let's get him on board because, like,
the amount of times in that film that they say, he's like, "What did you do then?" And they're like, eh, eh. Like that's basically what most of the scenes are. And he's like, no, not a. In fact, naughty.
RAC.
So, wow.
But Chadwick Boseman is a good actor, and he can pull off the unspoken stuff. He can, like, because basically he's on his own, really, isn't he? Because everyone else around him is a bit of a tinker. So
he's completely on his own. Like the amount of times you think he's got some sort of ally, and then they're just a bit shifty, and you think. At one point, I turned to Finn and said, "Is everyone corrupt apart from Chadwick Boseman? Everyone." It was cool. Sorry, I interrupted you a few times then.
No, it's fine. Yeah, and well, Keith David, he was all right, wasn't he? But he's in it for like 2 seconds, isn't he?
I saw him at the start of it, the very start, when it shows Chadwick Boseman as like a young kid in a church at his father's thing.
Yeah, and that was the one where my wife said, "Oh, is that the guy from EastEnders?" No.
That's another one. It's another man. But yeah, even then, I could just see Keith David. I could just see and it's blurred. And I said, "Oh, please be Keith David, please." And it was, and I was happy.
Yeah, you just need Keith David just to rock up in a film. He doesn't have to do much.
No, his voice is so good.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Which we're going to talk about at the end of this for the next episode.
Oh, yes. Yeah. So, yeah, very good film. Enjoyed that a lot.
And a nice, and again, touch of the Mission Impossible at the end where, I'm not going to give away any plot spoilers, but when he's having a conversation at the very end of the film and you realise the predicament he's in, and you think, how is this going to pan out then? And it was really good. I really liked it. I don't want to spoil it because obviously it's not 20 years old yet.
No, and it had it did have a bit of a throwback feel to it in the style of it, like the neon lighting and stuff. It felt like, it didn't feel like a TV movie. It felt like a movie, and yet wasn't all about superheroes and explosions and stuff. So
and it was tense. And again, and I know you. I think it's you that loves this. Is a film set over like a single night.
I love it.
Yeah, it is you. Yeah, so that must have ticked that box as well for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, and a hint of this is going to be like a segue here. There was a hint of the Warriors in that regard. Speaking of the Warriors, I watched 48 Hours.
Oh, really? That's Walter Hill, isn't it? Again,
so Walter Hill, yeah. I thought I'd seen this before, but I haven't.
So, oh, really? That must have been a nice treat for you then.
It's a real who's who of 80s action when you think about it, because it's got Nick Nolte, Eddie Murphy, Brian James, James Remar, David Patrick Kelly, Sonny Landham, and it's produced by Joel Silver and of course Lawrence Gordon. So it's and it's co-written by Stephen E. D'Souza. Didn't realize. It's amazing. It is massively dated as well.
I gotta say that I remember watching. I remember watching this. The most recent I watched this was it was when I first met Faye about 10 years ago, 9 years ago, not 10 years ago, and we were in the shared house I lived in at the time, and I had a row of DVDs above my head, and she said, "Let's put a film on." And I was like, "Oh, wicked! Which one should we watch?" And as I sat down on the wall, I knocked the shelf, and another 48 Hours hit me on the head and landed open in my lap. And I thought, well, the decision has been made for us by the gods, I'm afraid. So we watched it, and I do like the film. I really like the film, and the sequel, Another 48 Hours, is. I love Nick Nolte, and I loved Eddie Murphy in the 80s. So, as much as I love the sequel, it's a slightly diluted, rehashed version of the first one, and the first one is really raw, but some of the use of racial language in that film. Can you just call him by his first name, please?
It's amazing, and it is quite troubling, actually, genuinely, because it is
in the sequel. He doesn't call him that word. He calls him convict throughout the entire sequel because it's a 15, not an 18.
Right. Okay. Because the racial language is almost entirely one way as well, which is really, it's always from Nolte, and it's like, is this meant to be charming? But like, like Eddie Murphy gets one scene to beat on some rednecks, but I don't think it feels like enough when his partner is just casually calling him watermelon and things like that. It's like, really? Yeah. So it's ridiculously macho as well. And the policing in 48 Hours is staggering. Like the level of policing is hilariously bad because Nolte's character, right, Nick Nolte,
He's
seems like
basically
the
Rutger
only
Hauer on a Dead or Alive. Isn't he?
he is the only person in that city who seems to care about the shooting dead of 2 cops. He like his boss doesn't seem to give a damn. It's like, what? Surely this is like, don't they usually like swarm the place if cops have been killed and stuff? But yeah, so Nolte, yeah, and he never calls for backup or anything. So of course his backup is just a convict. Brilliant. And also Nick Nolte, he specifically says, right, that the cops at the start, one of whom is in Beverly Hills Cop as well, actually. He's a horrible bad guy in Beverly Hills Cop, not Stephen Burkoff. But yeah, Nick Nolte says it near the start, oh yeah, those cops died because they were sloppy, sort of thing. But he is a cop who's constantly shouting in the street, kicking open doors, and when he's driving, every time he drives in this film, he wheel spins and skids around the corner, twatting the pavement on the way around. It's amazing. It's so amazing. The fact that he's such a bad cop is amazing.
When you said that, you reminded me. I'm wondering, it's not Andrew Divoff, is it, or was he in the sequel?
I don't think Andrew Divoff is in it.
I'm trying to think who that cop is at the start now.
He is. He's in a few things. He was the really menacing, horrible guy in Beverly Hills Cop who kills his friend near the start. He's in a few.
Ed Ross and Andrew Divoff.
Yeah,
that's what I'm thinking of.
Right. Yeah, he's really menacing. He's really menacing in Beverly Hills Cop. I remember being terrified of him, and then discovering later that Beverly Hills Cop was originally written as a serious, like, cop drama, and that's why you've got these weird, like, tonally out of place moments when really harsh stuff happens.
I can't rest until I know who that man is, unfortunately, Rupert.
Yeah, let's
You need to find out. I can't move on.
Yeah, let's have a look then. Good old Google. Where was it? James Russo is the one who gets killed. Paul, I don't remember Paul Reiser being in Beverly Hills Cop. Is he in Beverly Hills Cop?
I can't remember.
I don't remember being in there. Stephen Burkoff. No, I can't see his name in there. Anyway, well,
okay.
Not the best radio, is it? So
looking up a bit part.
Yeah, but I will find out who it is because I need to know.
So 48 Hours. Is it a good film? Like, as in, I know it's obviously
got amazing reviews at the time, which
really
really surprised me, because you look at some of the classic kind of action movies from the 80s, and a lot of them were slaughtered at the time. You look at the Metacritic score for like Predator, and it's like 36 or something. It's like it got annihilated. And then you get something like 48 Hours, which is quite harsh and quite unpleasant in many ways, and yet absolutely loved it. The critics loved it. They thought it was really fresh and stuff. So I don't think it's really aged well. I think the problem is that it's not really funny enough to stand the test of time in a way that, say, Beverly Hills Cop has got, because that's genuinely still quite funny. So it hasn't got the humor, and the humor is almost entirely based around their banter, and at least 50% of their banter is racially charged, and that's the part which really hasn't aged well. And of course, the fact that the way that women are treated in the film is astonishing.
When you were watching that film, every time Nick Nolte opened his mouth, as you sat there with your like Asian wife, did you whistle nonchalantly at any dialogue? Or
Yeah, it's pretty rough. I mean, the thing is, Nick Nolte, he's always had this kind of gruffness about him. I don't think I've ever seen a film where he's just like a nice avuncular man, because even in like Cape Fear, he's got that growling voice, and then he turns into a bit of a monster as well. So yeah,
I suppose in 48 Hours, there's two sequences that spring to mind. One is it the one where at the start? Is it that one or the sequel where he's in bed with a woman?
Yes.
He gets to the bed and he puts a fag in his mouth and she starts talking to him and he's like,
he is rude to her.
Yeah, he is not a gentleman. And also, I think it's 48 Hours as well, and it always makes me laugh. It's such a subtle thing where he goes back to like his desk and he just opens his desk and like a bottle of like whiskey rolls down and then a load of bullets but just loose bullets, and he just picks up like a handful and just puts them in like his pocket loose. It just seems really unprofessional and really impractical.
Yeah, maybe that's where the whole, because we've watched a lot of like trashy action films where the cops are just bad at their job. And
yeah,
so,
it is astonishing how bad they are.
It's a trope. Yeah, so that was that. Do you want to move on to another one? Because I've got three more.
Okay, I'll just grab my next one here, which is going to be Killer Elite. Killer Elite, obviously, Jason Statham, Clive Owen.
This film partly in Cardiff.
Well, this is the thing, right? It's released in 2011, and it was just after I moved to Cardiff. And they said it's filmed partly in Cardiff, and I remember them saying that like Robert De Niro was on. It was on the street where the Promised Land used to be, who knew where the Central Bar Wetherspoons is. And I was like, oh, that's cool. It's filmed in Cardiff, and I watched it at the time. I can't remember how or where, but I remember watching it, and I don't know. It doesn't even make sense now, but I remember thinking, oh, this is filmed in Cardiff, so it's got to be good. Like it's I'm gonna at least get something like recognizing landmarks and stuff. And I think what happened at the time was it got pretty bad reviews, and I watched it, and I was so busy trying to spot Cardiffian landmarks that I don't think I paid any attention to the film. And I just have this. It's one of those films that totally slips under the radar, isn't it? Like Killer Elite, who cares?
Oh yeah.
And I thought. I remember just thinking I really didn't like that, but I was in bed the other day, had clocked out, and I thought I just fancy checking an action film. And Killer Elite came up on Amazon Prime, and I thought, well, it's got Robert De Niro and Jason Statham, who I fancy in it. So how bad can this be, really? So I put it on, and I was actually surprised because it is like a pretty decent film. Like there's a lot of the whole plot doesn't make sense. Where obviously Robert De Niro has been captured, and Jason Statham is his kind of protege, and Jason Statham is shown time and time again in that film, and it's filmed in the 80s. Obviously, you've got Dominic Purcell actually doing more than one facial expression and not just looking out of blinds for a change. Actually, like they call him the Welshman, but he's clearly got an Australian accent, and he tries to like infiltrate the SAS and says, "I'm the Welshman," and like, you are not from Gilverthgoch. I tell you that for free, Mr. Purcell. So he's got a ridiculous like slick back hair and a walrus mustache, good. And then, so Jason Statham is there to get Robert De Niro out of this sort of like wherever it is, like it's in like Iran or something, some like some real desert sort of third world place, and he's been captured by the Sheik, and he has to assassinate these 3 targets, or they'll just shoot Robert De Niro. Yeah. So all throughout the film, time and time again, Jason Statham is shown as this really kind of calculated, very capable man who like is really good at getting out of these situations. And instead of just thinking, oh, do you know what, with Dominic Purcell and my little team, I'll just assault that compound and just rescue him. Instead, he goes through these assassinations in these like ridiculous ways, and it is nice because Jason Statham is doing what Jason Statham does. Clive Owen I always find him like quite a compelling screen presence. He always seems quite full on.
Yeah.
And he is keen in it. And Robert De Niro it's probably the last film I saw Robert De Niro where he actually acted. He didn't just turn up and just for the sandwiches. And Dominic Purcell is fresh in my mind. It was nice to see him because obviously we saw him in that Uwe Boll film. Oh, what was it called? President Down. Black President Down. So because I had such low expectations for it. That was bad. Because I had such low expectations. When I watched it, I thought, this is actually like, I would assume this would be, like a solid 7 out of 10. It's not a bad film. It's probably just because of the caliber of actors in it, like Robert De Niro, people didn't get what they wanted. But if you watch it now, it hasn't aged particularly badly. It's fine. It's just a fine action film. So I was quite surprised by that. And it is one I probably like in 5 or 6 years, if I was a bit hungover and I thought, I'll check that on, I'll watch that again. So yeah, it's fine. It's not anywhere near as I still, after 10 years of living in Cardiff, I still only spotted like one place I knew.
Yeah. Apparently it was around Promised Land and Buffalo Bar and stuff. Neither of which exist anymore, I think.
No, they don't.
Yeah. So I don't know whether it was Killer Elite or not. There was was it Killer Elite? There's one film, Jason Statham film, which really heavily referenced a really early Stanley Kubrick film called. Is there a bit where they end up in a mannequin factory at all?
Yes, it is.
Yes, yeah, I think it must be that then, because there's is it Killer's Kiss? Really early Kubrick film.
1957?
53, I think.
53?
Yeah. In that, they, because Kubrick was filming illegally, he did a lot of the, shot a lot of the action on rooftops, so the police couldn't get him. But so there's a bit where, like, one of the characters, like, is being chased across rooftops and ends up in a mannequin factory. And I remember watching Killer Elite and thinking, this is just directly referencing that in such a weird reference to have in that film, because it's like, who's really going to notice that unless they're a complete Kubrick nerd like me? But I thought that was quite nice.
Your glasses were firmly up your nose when you watched that.
So far up my nose. It was one of the few times I've spoken in the cinema. Yeah,
really.
Yeah, I had to tell Dave. I think he was sitting next to me.
Dave.
Yes, so let's move on to Jurassic World: Fallen Kingdom. I think you've probably seen the first Fallen. Jurassic.
Oh, right, I was going to say, is this the first? Or this is the second one, is it?
This is the second one, and I loathed the first Jurassic World. I didn't ever exactly have high hopes for this one, but it was directed by, what's his name, J.A. Bayona, I guess I want to say Mexican director. That's my phone. Let's put that on silent. Yeah. So, and who did The Impossible, which was the
that film with Naomi Watts.
Yeah.
And
that had very impressive action in it. Anyway, it's bad. It's a bad movie, but it's slightly less offensively bad than the first one. At least in this one, there's slightly less of a sense of it being like actively against its female protagonist this time around. But Chris Pratt's character is still completely and utterly charmless. He just comes across as dismissive and rude most of the time. I don't get what his appeal is at all. But the real enemy of this film, we talked about that immaculate reality before. The real enemy of this film is its plot logic. That includes character motivation as well. Right. So basically, the setup is that there's a volcano going to go off on the island where all the dinosaurs are, and there's this big kind of like public uprising to say you've got to save them. We can't just let them die, sort of thing. Now, Bryce Dallas Howard's character from the first one, I can understand that she might not want the dinosaurs to be killed, right? But why? I don't know why she would be actively interested in going back to that place where she'd been chased by a Tyrannosaurus Rex. Like, I get that she'd be supportive of them, but why would she choose to go back there? And you know, like, and it made me think of Aliens, the James Cameron film, and the way they deal with that problem. And I worked it out. It's like 3 very short scenes in Aliens, how they solve it. Like Ripley says, going back to that place is a bad idea. That's one scene. She then refuses to go. That's another scene. Then there's a third scene where she has a nightmare and reluctantly agrees, but with certain terms attached. And that's like 10 minutes of screen time. That's all you need to make it logical that someone's going to go back anyway. But yeah, and later on there's a scene with in Jurassic World: Fallen Kingdom where this little girl who has clearly proven to be very smart and resourceful. She's kind of the Newt character in this, where she's like hiding around the place and the dinosaurs can't get to her. But then, like, when this like this genetically mutated super dinosaur escapes and is stalking her, she escapes from it and then goes straight to bed. She goes to bed. She goes into her bedroom, just, you know, completely open, and gets under the covers. And I get what they're trying to do. Is it's like a primal fear thing, and it's the one place you feel safe. But that's not how she's been presented as a person. She's not been presented as just babyish. She's been presented as very smart and resourceful. So why would she go to bed? And the answer is because they want to have a cool shot of a dinosaur claw reaching over a bed towards a little girl, and that's it. And I hate it when movies force cool shots through a complete lack of plot logic. It doesn't earn that right to have that. Anyway, so so it's just a load of set pieces really, strung together with a terrible script. I quite like Toby Jones is in it, and he's dressed up like Donald Trump with a set of fake teeth, so that was good.
that was it. $200 million well spent.
Amazing.
I remember watching actually, this is the thing. The first one, I remember watching it and just being bored. I remember really being bored. And and the whole thing about, like, you were talking about the way they treat women and stuff. I think that generally completely passed me by because of my overriding boredom. I think I was paying so little attention to it. I just thought I didn't really care.
It's nasty. There was a great article written by the now shamed Devon Faraci of Birth Movies Death, where he talks about the specific scene where one woman is tortured to death, really, by the dinosaurs. It's really protracted, and it was really interesting and very wise to explain why it is that it feels so uncomfortable in that scene. And he talks about, like, film having a language that on an almost unconscious level we react in certain ways depending on whether the person deserved it or not. This is why, like, we're okay with watching the evil guy get torn apart, but in Jurassic World he wasn't torn apart. It was Vincent D'Onofrio, and he gets killed off screen. And yet this woman, whose only crime has been not liking children, she is picked up, torn apart, ripped to pieces, and then swallowed by a dinosaur. And it's like, it's weird. And the problem is, it doesn't.
But it probably was a cool shot, Rupert.
Yes, it was a cool shot as he plummeted into his mouth. I think I was having a think about Jurassic Park and its sequels, and the reason why Jurassic Park is the only good Jurassic Park film. And I think the problem is, it comes down to this, is that all the Jurassic Park sequels, including Lost World, they all have bad guys in them. And this is, when you think about what Jurassic Park, it didn't have any bad guys, really. And
it had misguided people in it.
Yeah, exactly. So there are no actively bad guys in the film. I mean, Dennis Nedry is as close as you get to a bad guy, I suppose, but he's depicted more as thoughtless and stupid rather than evil. And that's why he's killed halfway through, because he's too stupid to, realize what's going on. He's almost like a MacGuffin, really, isn't he? So, and that means that the action, what happens in Jurassic Park is dovetailing with its central theme, and that is of humans overreaching their grasp of science. And so they get punished for that, but they're not doing it out with evil intent. Like, what's his name? John Hammond isn't doing it with evil intent. He wants to bring joy to the world, but he does not. Yeah, but once they started introducing bad guys, with the more bad guys you introduce, it has a direct effect on the sense of wonder that the dinosaurs once had. It becomes a completely different kind of dynamic.
John Hammond is so focused on bringing joy to the world that he even forgets to visit his dentist, doesn't he?
So harsh. He's such an old man.
He was at least 40 in that.
He was, wasn't he? Yeah, so it's crap, really.
I think of... You get paid £400 per review on this channel, Rupert, and I want more than it's crap, I'm afraid. I think that I have an aspect of my personality that I think that I have that a lot of, I get the sense that a lot of people don't, is that I don't really, when I watch a film, I don't care what other people think about it. Like, I don't have, like stuff in the 80s, I don't hold anything dear. So when it comes to things that like people talk about Indiana Jones or the Goonies or like even the films I love, if people don't like them, I just think, fair enough. I don't really get defensive because I think it's completely subjective. But with Jurassic Park, I remember the first film I watched again, I think about 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And it is still impressive. Like the visuals is impressive, but the truth is that, like, Laura Dern and Sam Neill and Richard Attenborough and Jeff Goldblum are all very good actors.
Yes.
And it's like, even if you take the tension in the film, it's still good. But there's a lot of sequences in that film, where they're just looking at dinosaurs, and you're like, now you watch it now and you're like, okay, I know you just love the majesty of it, but it's like when you're not so completely soaked up in the special effects, there are a few moments where you think, okie dokie, we can move on now. But it's still good. It's still a good film.
It's still very impressive. Yeah,
and then the sequels, like I don't remember any of them. Like I know for a fact I've seen them all, but I remember nothing about them, and no one talks about them. And
do you remember William H. Macy being married to Tia Carrere?
She wouldn't fancy him.
Was it Tia Carrere? I'm not even sure it was. It wasn't Tia Carrere, was it?
You know Tia Carrere. She was Nicolas Cage's wife in Family Man 2000.
Obviously,
That
it was. I'm
I
pretty
watched
sure
that
it
film
wasn't
about
Tia
40
Carrere.
times
Anyway.
because I fancied it. I think it is Tia Carrere. I want it to be Tia Carrere.
No, it's someone young. Tia Leone. Sorry, yeah.
That's what I'm thinking of. Tia Leone. Yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah, that's the website I was thinking of.
Yeah. That was bad. They're just bad. I mean, even the Lost World, that was Spielberg, and it was just not.
These films, though, do they get well received?
Not particularly, to be honest. I don't think any of them have. I think the first one was well received, and then they've all been pretty dismissed since then, really.
Funnily enough, it's weird you should mention specifically Jurassic Park: The Fallen Kingdom, because I was having a conversation with my parents earlier in the week talking about the first film I remember seeing at the cinema, which was Jurassic Park. And my dad said, that's not true, because the first film you ever saw was Rocky V. And I thought, oh my God, what a disappointing first film. I don't remember it. I don't remember ever having seen it.
It's not even Rocky IV.
No, it's not even anything. So, yeah. What was the first film you saw at the cinema?
The first one I properly remember seeing was Who Framed Roger Rabbit, but
terrifying,
absolutely terrifying. But I have very, very vague memories of watching Black Cauldron, which was a really dark Disney film from the mid '80s. So I must have watched that when I was a toddler, really. But yeah.
God, yeah, you must have.
I've tried watching that again since, and it doesn't really bring back memories. I just thought this is really heavy and dark for a children's film. But I think that was during the Disney slump.
The theme of today's episode.
Yeah. Disney had a massive slump, didn't they, prior to like Aladdin and Lion King and stuff, their resurgence. So I guess it was during that period.
Well, this is your talk about Jurassic Park is a really nice segue actually into the film I want to talk about, which is Mary with Emily Mortimer and Gary Oldman. Right. So this is interesting because
I've seen this.
You've seen it, have you?
Yeah. Why have I seen this?
I don't know why you would have seen it.
I might have got a review. Had to do it for a review, maybe. Hang on. You keep talking, and I'll find out if I did a review of this.
Okay, dokie. So we watched a film which we'll talk about soon called Virtual Combat, which I won't mention now, but we watched Virtual Combat last Thursday, Rupert and I, and then as I was watching the film, as I went out to, pour myself a drink, I popped my head into the bedroom, and Faye was watching this film, and I just popped my head in, and I saw like Gary Oldman, Emily Mortimer, they were on a boat, and they were arguing, and I came back in, and then because she'd paused it to have a conversation with her mum, when our film finished, she was still on like 20 or 30 minutes into hers. So I thought, this is perfect, 2 films one night, boom, count me in. So I watched this film, Mary. I didn't know what it was called till afterwards, and I thought, this is a film where Emily Mortimer and Gary Oldman are putting on really, really unconvincing American accents. And it's on a boat. Have you found your review yet?
Yes, I have found my review, and I have definitely seen it.
What score did your review get it?
I did not give it a score because we weren't doing that, but I did not give it a favourable review.
It's what I found was I was watching it. This is the main takeaway, and I could literally stop talking after I say this. I was watching it, and I was thinking, this is a haunted ship film.
Yeah.
With Gary Oldman and Emily Mortimer, and kind of like Cape Fear on a boat, basically. And like the ship is turned against them. Is it haunted? Is it not? Whatever. Yeah. And I thought, well, this film is obviously from 2002 or 3 or something. Yeah. And then when I went on IMDb, I thought 2019. Why is Gary Oldman in a completely nonsense throwaway haunted ship film in 2019 after he's won an Oscar for Churchill, after he's done all these amazing films? And I thought, why is this accent's so bad. Like, he is known for like getting lost in characters and doing these amazing portrayals of people from different even ethnicities, backgrounds, accents, and it was just like no one cared in the film, and it was preposterous that it was made, and I don't know why. I
It
was
was
lying in
baffling,
bed,
wasn't
and even as I was drifting off to sleep, I would like mutter 2019. 2019.
it?
It
Isn't
was
there? There's
bizarre.
a bit at the start though where there's a monster on board as well, or something jumps out at the start, and you're thinking. I thought it was going to be
Like a
there's a
Ringu
monster,
film.
yeah, but then it turns into like a kind of psychological drama like Dead Calm, but then it also turns into like a J horror type thing with a woman with like lank hair, and it's like what is happening? It's
What
just
happens
trying
is,
to
right,
mix all these different elements which just
the
don't work at all.
first half of the film is Emily Mortimer saying to Gary Oldman in a bad accent, "There's something on the boat. It's haunted," and him saying, "No, no," and then the latter half of the film is Gary Oldman saying, "Right, okay, there's something on the boat. It's haunted," and that's it. That's the film. And it ends on a ridiculous, like, jump scare cliffhanger thing, as if it's going to be explored further. What?
Yeah.
It's honestly, I know that one of the things Chris often says is, however bad a film is, he's like, "Oh yeah, but I couldn't have made that. We couldn't have made that film." And I think the answer here is, I would, if I was offered that script, they said, "We'll pay you money to make this," I'd say, why is anyone involved? What is happening? Why is this happening? It's bizarre.
Sometimes I wonder when it comes to these things whether what's happened is that the director or someone involved personally knows one of the famous actors in it, right? So say they know Gary Oldman, and then they can go to like I don't know, Emily Mortimer or something, and say, "Well, we can't get Emily Blunt, so let's get Emily Mortimer." We can say, "Well, we got Gary Oldman.
So we'll get Gary Boozy.
We'll get Gary Sinise." Yeah. Well, anyway, my review is pretty scathing, really. It just says it's a bit of a muddled mess. And
yeah, actually, do you want to say where you can see that review if people do want to check out your written review of it, which will be more involved?
I can't remember where I put it. Where was that? This must have been on Nerdly. Yeah, nerdly.co.uk.
So Nerdly, Mary Rupert, and you'll find it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's very rare that I will watch a film and I'm so busy thinking about the reasons why it could possibly have been made that I don't actually see what happens.
Yeah.
Like, I couldn't, even now, I just think it's such a bizarre career move and it's such a nonsense throwaway film.
I mentioned in my review that there is a bit, at the end, there's obviously like a horror type stinger moment. And I've mentioned in my review that they actually retroactively alter footage that we've already seen.
Oh my God!
Which is bad news. That is cheating. You can't do that.
Yeah,
that's really bad. But I don't remember the specific moment, obviously, because it's non-spoilerish. But
oh yeah, it was bizarre. So don't watch that.
Okay. Well, I already have, so.
Okay, I won't watch that again.
I won't watch it again.
If there could be a horror, there could be an entire series of horror films. Like, don't watch that, like a Ring thing, and then the sequel, don't watch that again, and then the third one, oh, you're not watching that again, are you? And then the reboot, I'm going to watch that. And then the sequel to the reboot, are you going to watch that too? Oh my God! Write this down. We'll get a sitcom of it.
We're not watching that again. What? Exclamation mark. We're not watching that again.
Oh God.
Dante's Peak.
Finally. And it's not about the hairline of the protagonist of the Devil May Cry games, I want to point
out. This is the one with Pierce Brosnan and Linda Hamilton, not the one with Tommy Lee Jones. That was Volcano.
And not Joe versus the Volcano with Tom Hanks.
No. This one, I think this was a bigger hit than Volcano was, but because it was released 2 months earlier, I think. It's directed by Roger Donaldson, who you may not have heard of, but he is a talented hack who's done some good stuff with Kevin Costner. He did No Way Out and 13 Days.
That was a good film.
Yeah, 13 Days he did as well, but the Cuban Missile Crisis, that was good. But I mean, he's not particularly interesting director. He just makes solid movies. But anyway, you can kind of imagine that Kevin Costner just wasn't available for this film or something because it's his wheelhouse. So yeah, Pierce Brosnan plays a volcanologist. He comes to this small town where Linda Hamilton is the mayor, but she also works in a coffee shop. It's a bit weird. Don't really understand that. But
What?
I don't know. I don't get why she's the mayor. Like she didn't
She
really
works
do
in a
much.
coffee
It just
shop.
gives her access to meetings, I think.
What?
Anyway, so it's the usual thing. Like it comes along. Like there's a volcano called Dante's Peak over the town. Pierce Brosnan keeps saying, "Oh, I get the feeling it's going to blow," sort of thing. Because in the
Is he
prologue,
saying that as a chat line to Linda Hamilton as he's thrusting in the coffee shop?
he you see in the prologue basically his wife died in like when they're trying to escape a volcano. So he goes to this place and he's convinced it's going to blow, and I don't know, it's weirdly like anti-science in a way because basically his team and his boss are saying, look, none of the instruments are suggesting that this thing's going to blow, so let's not panic about it. But Pierce Brosnan's like, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. I get a feeling and all this kind of stuff, which is a bit cheeky.
So, yeah, it's cheating, isn't it? So it's basically like pulling on emotions as opposed to science.
Yeah, and because of course volcanology isn't an exact science. I mean, you're never going to be sure, but that doesn't make science itself unreliable. So it seems reasonable that they would go with the science. But anyway, so there's nothing really. It's a disaster movie basically, and I think Pierce Brosnan and Linda Hamilton have got quite a nice chemistry actually. I like the fact that they're both in their early 40s, so that's cool. It's quite unusual.
Is Linda Hamilton, is she a good actor? I genuinely ask that because I've never really seen her.
She's quite charmingly goofy in it, which is quite nice. I think that maybe that's why they made her the mayor, because they didn't want her to be a kind of goofy housewife. She is in a position of power, but at the same time she's quite down to earth and human. And Pierce Brosnan, the second he gets there, he is instantly like a father figure to her kids as well, by the way. The second he steps foot in there, he's playing games with them, he's like telling them off and stuff. It's like she's fine with that.
Yeah, he's a bad husband. He's having an affair behind her back. Like he steps off the train and they run up to him and they're, Daddy!
So when it explodes, which of course it does, it's actually quite impressive. Like in terms of spectacle, it's quite impressive.
This is like what, 97?
Yeah. Yeah,
and it does it when you say I haven't seen this, so it's a disaster film. Does the volcano like go off early, so the whole film is them surviving it, or does it lead up to it?
It leads up to it, so it's very much like the last half hour of the film is pretty much things blowing up and things falling from the sky, and it is quite well done actually. Like they didn't try and use a bunch of early CGI. That's the key thing, really. So
we've all seen
when the town, like, they must have built a town or something, because when it starts coming down, it just smashes up the whole place, and it's clearly they use clever model work, and big scale special effects basically, and they might use some CG on the smoke effects, but other than that, it's pretty good. It ends weirdly suddenly. That's what I noticed about it. Yeah, it's really odd because it's like it just feels like it's really picking up, and like it's very much like just them, the family unit, who've managed to get to a certain distance, and then suddenly, and like they found somewhere to hide, and then it's like one like mini action scene which is quite tense, and then suddenly it's like, oh, everything's over, everything's fine. It's weird. It's really odd. It's almost like it was missing just a couple of scenes towards the end. Otherwise, it would have been pretty decent, really. And it's fine. It's fine. It's better than Volcano. I remember Volcano being really tedious because that was just like slow moving lava. It was like The Blob or something with Steve McQueen.
So, okay. See, I could be enticed to watching that, just if only to broaden my horizons in terms of Linda Hamilton's back catalogue.
She's fine. She's quite charming, and she's kind of, I don't know, they're kind of believable that they would be attracted to each other.
I think the only other films I've seen her in are Retroactive with James Belushi, which I solely remember because there's a scene where James Belushi walks into like a kind of diner in the middle of nowhere, and the camera cuts between him shooting a 6-shot pistol and someone behind the counter, and he fires it as he's walking forward 28 times without reloading. 28 times. And another film she was in, I can't remember the title of. I think it's called like Double Lives or something, and it's her playing herself and her twin sister. I think Sam Elliott might be in it, but that's like an 80s kind of thriller. So yeah, I should watch more Linda Hamilton films, really.
You must have seen Children of the Corn, though, surely.
She in that? Oh God, I watched Children of the Corn 10 a few years ago. That's the last film we watched in the old flat. Faye said, "Let's watch Children of the Corn 10." Bloody hell!
Oh, what a way to say goodbye.
Honestly, like I'm holding in my hand a PlayStation 2 controller as I say this, and I reckon that was probably worth more on eBay than the entire budget of Children of the Corn 10. That's baffling. So are you going to rewatch Volcano to kind of get a taster for those?
I don't know about that. Maybe. I do like a disaster movie. I like a 90s action movie. So I just
there
remember
is a certain pull to them. Yeah.
What's that?
There's a certain pull to 90s action films. Disaster movies aren't really my forte, but
no, there are very few good ones.
One of the things I do want to say before we move on is Roger Donaldson also directed Cocktail, and yeah, and I remember the one scene in that film that actually made me like jerk up in my chair was when Brian Brown talks to him and he's like, go and get a drink, and then he goes, and then he comes back 5 minutes later and he smashed a brandy bottle and slashed his throat with a decanter, and I thought, bloody, and he is dead. Yeah, there's no like he walks in and he's gurgling and he's like, oh, I've made a mistake, where he is dead. And I thought, you were keen, Brian.
That's a weird film, that. What's that weirdly recently as well?
Was it good?
No, it's. I found it a little bit dull, really. I don't know. It's a strange one.
FX Murder by Illusion, or
well, nothing's as good as FX Murder by Illusion. Clearly, what was the sequel called?
FX2.
It must have had a subtitle.
Oh, for God's sake! Okay, let me type in Brian Brown. Okay. Brian Brown, 72, still alive, good. I never want that man to die. Filmography, 88. What was it? FX. Oh, right, okay. So FX, also known as or subtitled Murder by Illusion. And then, let me go down this. Oh, it's a remake. Oh, no, it's a remake of it. FX2, The Deadly Art of Illusion.
Jesus.
I've never seen those films.
That's basically the same title then, isn't it? Murder by Illusion and The Deadly Art of Illusion.
That's directed by Richard Franklin. I don't know if that rings a bell with you.
That does ring a bell. That wasn't Richard Franklin the one who directed The Money Pit, and we discussed him last week.
He directed Psycho 2. He directed... I can't see The Money Pit on here. If he did direct it, it's not on here anyway. Although he did...
I'm thinking of Richard Benjamin.
He did direct The Lost World. TV series, though, not what you're thinking of. I need to watch this.
So I've only got one more film on my list.
Well, the only one I've got is Virtual Combat. So do you want to do that and then yours?
We'll knock Pocahontas on the head, so to speak.
Well, no, we don't knock it on the head. You can cover Pocahontas.
I read about this, and apparently Disney thought that Pocahontas was going to be the bigger hit than Lion King, so they threw all their talent at Pocahontas,
right? And
it turned out not to be as big a hit, did it? But I think it's weird looking anyway. I don't think it's that. I mean, she's nicely animated, but it looks really strange. Like the backgrounds have this weird, like they look like they're out of a 80s fantasy animation, like Fire and Ice or something. There's this kind of slightly washed out, fantastical, psychedelic look. They basically look like Roger Dean paintings.
Right, so they're fantastic.
Which should be really cool, but yeah, I don't know. I don't think it really worked, but I don't think they'd make this film today. I mean, the Pocahontas story is always a really, really dubious one anyway. Because
okay. Is it based on some sort of fact then?
Well, supposedly. I mean, the romanticized idea is that she was like a Native American princess who fell in love with an Englishman and came back to England, and because of the power of love. But in reality, it was quite possible that she was bullied into it or kidnapped. She was almost certainly a child, so possibly 14, maybe even 12. And and the reality is she came back to England and then died soon afterwards anyway. So yeah, and like yeah, so the idea behind the story, like the Disney version, is fine. Like the idea that basically like the English come along and they fight the Native Americans and they're back and forth, and then they realize in the end that hatred is not going to help and they've got to learn to get along, etc.
Right.
Of course, this doesn't mention the fact that the indigenous population of North America were actually the victims of a systemic genocide over generations by the Europeans. Got to mention that. And I think that's the real problem, is that the gap between the film and the brutal reality is just too massive, and it just feels uncomfortable watching it.
Well,
like
that it's just kind of glossing over these atrocities. Yeah. It's like, oh, it's all fine. It was all fine in the end.
Well, apparently this guy called Governor Ratcliffe, who's depicted in the Disney version as being, he's kind of like the evil money grabbing Englishman, but apparently in real life what happened was the natives invited Ratcliffe and a load of his men for like a meal or whatever, and then they basically stitched them up. They tied up Ratcliffe, they skinned him alive, they peeled off his skin, and they peeled his face off last so that he could watch the whole thing as it happened to him, and then they burned him. So that's kind of the reality of what's going on, and you see the extremeness of that kind of brutality of that world, and you just think, nah, I don't know, it's like Disney can't, they're taking something so brutal and really romanticizing it. Yeah. And I mean, they do have like this weirdly serious tone to the whole film. Like, I'm not sure that kids today would really find it that exciting. Like, for example, like there are kind of slapstick animals in it, but they can't talk or anything because supposedly that would be too fantastical. But there's still animals going around hitting each other and stuff. So it's a strangely tonally awkward film.
And to make it worse, the puzzle platform on the Mega Drive is really middling as well.
Really?
Unbelievably.
Was it like The Lion King and Aladdin? Like really elaborate animation and stuff?
Yes. Obviously Aladdin and The Lion King are really good. The Lion King is tough. But with it's much more of a slow-paced puzzle platform where you kind of take over other animals and to move forward, kind of like The Lost Vikings in a way.
Right.
But it's just a little bit cumbersome. And the foregrounds get mixed up with the backgrounds, obviously. So the last thing we're here then to talk about is with Don the Dragon Wilson in Virtual Combat.
Yeah.
Now, I want to preface this by saying that I believe that there is a sweet spot in the 1990s when budget met writing, before they just started chucking anyone who knew martial arts in a film and hoping that something good would happen. This is not that sweet point. This film was like, it was the perfect meld of having a martial artist who cannot act in a film that was badly edited and directed with a nonsensical story and loads of really awkward character motivations.
It really made no sense, the story. Why people were in certain places. Some of the coincidences in that film were staggering. Like where he rocks up at that homeless shelter and happens to meet one of the robots. It's like, what? How would that even happen? It's like the only people living in LA or wherever it is are just the cast of this film.
So the story is that it's the future. It's probably 1996 or something, and it's like everyone is hips deep in these kind of like sex, because it's directed by Andrew Stevens, who we all know from stuff like Fatal Instinct 2 and Body Chemistry 4. So he was basically a softcore porn actor with Shannon Tweed and Shannon Weary in the 90s, and then he had a chance to do his directorial debut. So there's lots of boobs in it. And the story is that like virtual sex robots represent people having sex with these virtual sex robots are represented as in like this kind of spinning wheel.
Yeah.
With
a NASA style training thing.
Yeah.
It's weird. Yeah.
Like that would be sexy. Like you just spewing because of the G-force is sexy. And so the next step obviously is scientist says, I've actually made this goo that means that these kind of sex bots can come to life.
Yeah.
And so they come out of this goo, and of course the first thing that happens is the evil guy who runs the corporation that does these sort of sex bot things. Literally, these women come out of this goo, and he instantly says, "Wicked, I'm taking them 3 up to my room, and we're just going to just release them on the world."
Mass market. Yeah. He instantly says that without any kind of like questions or
testing
research or anything.
Wonder at the technological advancements. Wicked,
and within
we'll sell
seconds, they're snapping the scientist's neck.
Yeah. So there's also so the main bad guy. We'll get onto him in a minute. Is the main bad guy is released because it kind of malfunctions, and it releases like the main boss called Dante, actually. Dante from of this like fighting game.
Second name Peak.
He Dante Peak, Dante Peter Peak. It doesn't speak for some reason that is never explained in the real world. He just looks at things, frowns, and shakes his mullet a bit, and then there's just this really doom-laden voiceover as he's got his mouth closed, and it is dreadful. And we assume it's because it's a foreign actor that doesn't know any English, and they couldn't be bothered to post it.
He can fight, but he can't act. Yeah.
But it's the whole thing is just a parade of nonsense. Dragon Wilson cannot act, and he is surrounded by people that also cannot act. And there's genuinely a sequence, as we mentioned at the start of this podcast, where he is chasing Dante, the bad guy, through. He's a cop after him. Actually, no, he's not even. He works on a dam. He's not even a cop. He's like a dam worker, and he chases him through this kind of. It's like an industrial complex, and there's a shot of him climbing down a ladder, and then the next shot is him on the roof.
He's not just climbing down a ladder, but climbing down a ladder into like a catacomb-like dark room
of steaming pipes
with like light pouring in from above, but then it's in darkness. So you think, right, going to the belly of the beast. Next shot, boom, on the roof. How?
It's baffling, absolutely baffling. And you said that the whole film would be solved if someone just had a gun.
Yes.
Because they keep getting into these awful, like sort of awfully choreographed fights. When if someone just pulled out a gun and shot them, they'll just be it.
Yeah, if that's all they needed to do. It could work either way. So either Dante's Peak could have pulled out a gun and just shot Don the Dragon, or the other way around. Don the Dragon just pulled out a gun and shot one of them.
Because they've got all these like taser things, haven't they? These like laser guns. But people are constantly just getting shot by them, and there's no effect.
He gets shot. Like Don the Dragon Wilson gets shot in the back by one of them, and he just means he's got a slightly bad back. He can still walk around. He's fine. It's no blood or anything. It's not even as good as a taser.
It's baffling. And of course, the scenes in it where they try to delve into the morality of these kind of like live sex bots, bringing them into the real world and what that entails now that they live outside of their programming.
Yeah,
that is not handled with any grace.
No. The whole thing about so the women, the sex bot women, they come out and entirely capable of functioning in this world, this alien world to them, and so they're getting around the place, making decisions, etc., being very confident, and then
with a full geographical knowledge of LA.
Yeah. And then there's a scene where one of them meets Don the Dragon Wilson, and suddenly she's like, I do not understand your ways, and all this kind of stuff. It's like, what? It's just suddenly turned into like a 50s movie about some tribeswoman, like, I don't know, like a Doug McClure film. You know, those ones where they go to like a lost world of Atlantis or whatever, find a tribeswoman who can speak English, of course, and she's like, oh, I do not understand your ways, but I understand sex. Basically, that's basically what it is.
Yeah, and then Don says, "Oh, wicked."
Yeah, that's basically it.
Yeah,
it's what there's a YouTuber I quite like. Is it the Pop Detective, something like that? Anyway, he talks a lot about tropes in like films and stuff, and he calls it the Born Stupid Yesterday, I think he calls it, trope, which is this particular trope in films, particularly sexist trope in films, where it will be like, whether it's a tribeswoman or whatever, but it'll be like the sexy woman who's completely brainless and needs to be guided by the man and taught how to like function in the world, sort of thing, but she's obviously really hot and attracted to him. and it's like it's almost like she's just becomes a puppet for him, and that's essentially what that particular scene was about.
I think as well, it really focuses on a problem that happens with a lot of martial arts films where they get a martial artist in and they think wicked, he's an actual like real world champion at his chosen martial art. But then because it's so badly choreographed and edited, and because the people he's fighting don't have the same level of skill, it just looks really, they either cover it up by having like really quick edits so you're not really enjoying it anyway, or it's just really clunkily filmed and it just looks really stupid, like two dickheads fighting in a car park. So there's no joy on any level of it.
No, it makes you realize the need for a good choreographer. Born Sexy Yesterday was the trope I was thinking of. Pop Culture Detective uses he mentions this Born Sexy Yesterday. So very hot, sexy women know how to seduce men, but don't have a clue about anything else, basically. It's bad. So that wasn't the best. And there wasn't that much virtual stuff in it, really, was there? I kind of wanted there to be more Lawnmower Man, like early CGI stuff.
Oh, God.
That would have been cool.
Anything would have been better than what it was.
Anything would have been better than what it was.
So, so that sums up this episode. But it was an interesting mix of films this week, I gotta say.
I didn't watch many good films, I gotta say, but yeah.
Well, I was gonna say to you, what is your film of the week?
Well, I do think Just Mercy, because it's the only. Well, I mean, Erin Brockovich was quite good as well, but Just Mercy was the only really good film I watched, basically, over this period. Like all the rest were like okay or flawed,
or actively bad.
Yes.
For me, I'd probably say Mission Impossible Fallout, because I really generally thought it was on the poster they just say things like brilliant, 5 stars. Like I can imagine this poster saying like a breathtaking thrill ride, and I would be like, yeah, I actually agree with that, because it is genuinely this full on, easily could have been split into 2 films, but I'm glad it.
No, I think it. Yeah, very good stuff. Okay, well, that's that then.
That's that. So have you got again usual question? Have you got any? Have you more Coming to Annihilation, where they replace Christopher Lambert with someone else? They kill off Lyndon Ashby in the first scene, and the ancient Chinese emperor turns out to be no other than Brian Thompson. So it's definitely worth a watch, that one.
I'm not sure what's coming up next.
Oh, they do replace Christopher Lambert with James Remar, so it's not too bad.
Oh, well, there you go. Can't argue with that.
Who doesn't talk like he needs to take his inhaler all the time.
I haven't really got anything particular lined up. Nothing's really tickling my fancy, but I'll just watch some trash, whatever's on, really.
Watch any old cock that comes on the telly, to be honest. I'm the same. I quite like it though, because we got nothing lined up, and I know that like they'll now that I'm broadening my horizons into like films that cost more than 15 quid, I'm looking forward to seeing some real corkers.
Yeah. I think that's because there was a time when I'd literally only be watching horror films, and I haven't seen a horror film in a good long while. So maybe I need a little horror marathon.
That would be cool. Right then, I'll love you and leave you.
All right.
And I'll see you next time.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Love you. Bye.
Love you too. What?